the end there. Thank you for joining us this morning. Welcome to Spring 1. Can I just, I'll just introduce us first of all. My name is Andy Piper, and my role at Pivotal is the developer advocate for the Cloud Foundry platform. There I am. So I've been doing this for a couple of years now. I will hold my hands up and say, I love Spring. I loved the keynote last night, but I'm not a Spring expert. And many of you are, some of you may not be. This man here, you may know, is Josh Long. And he's my counterpart in the Spring team. He's the Spring developer advocate. And he's written lots and lots of cool stuff. And he'll be speaking to you and actually showing you some code after I've done the hand-wavy, cloudy stuff.
Spring out the cloud guy.
Yeah. This is how we work. So also, just in case you're kind of going, developer advocate, what the heck? You're right. So this is what we do, right? Developer advocates. Some companies like have developer evangelists, right? And that's great because they kind of stand, they come and lay their hands on you and then you believe, right? So what Josh and I do, and my colleagues in the developer relations team, we're developer advocates. So what we are is your advocates, right? So if you have questions or you think our stuff sucks, then we listen and we go back and beat up the engineering team and tell Adrian that they're doing a really bad job. Okay. So also, of course, we are here to advocate that our stuff is really cool. Okay, and we'd love you to believe that, but we hope to convince you through demonstration and what? Merit. Yes, I thought you said marriage just then. Okay, no.
That would be a very
it could be difficult to marry all of them at once. Right, okay. So I love my job, by the way. I think it's an awesome thing to be doing. So what we're going to cover in the next 90 minutes, 90 minutes, wow. Do you think that's going to, yeah, we've got a lot to talk about, maybe.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a quick overview for those of you that have never heard of Cloud Foundry at all, or those of you that had never heard of it before last night's keynote, or I don't want to spend lots of time on it because I know that some of you will have been to the last couple of Spring ones where we have talked about it. But importantly, I also want to talk about what's new since the last time we were all together in DC last year, right? Because a lot has changed with the Cloud Foundry platform. I also want to talk about this thing, run.pivotal.io, which is Pivotal's implementation of a public cloud based on Cloud Foundry. And we'll talk about the new Java build pack for Cloud Foundry as well, which is extremely cool, built by our Spring team. And then we're going to do lots of demos, because it's Spring 1, and that's what we do, right? We show code, we do live demos. Sometimes we screw up and fix things in front of you, and we hopefully don't look too bad. Is that okay for everyone as an agenda? People happy with that? Getting a few nods? Okay, let's see. Importantly, do remember that we're here to help. So if you've got questions, then do shout out. Who was at the keynote last night? Almost everyone. Who wasn't at the keynote last night? Okay, a couple of people. So, who loved Chris Beam's literally switching the switch on Spring.io last night live? Adrian was the first hand up there. And he was joking that people were telling him not to do it. People were literally telling him, please don't do this live in the middle of, anyway. So it's lovely, isn't it? And this, my friends, is built in Spring, and it runs on Cloud Foundry, as you will have seen last night at the keynote. And we'll go through some of that as we go through this morning. It's a really nice site, and we really love it, and we hope you will as well, and engage with us through it. Let's just remind ourselves why we're here and what Spring is. Okay, so Spring really is giving us a lot of flexibility, especially with the new Spring IO platform. We're giving you a lot of choice as well, really important here. So as you can see in the top left of this slide, I've got Cloud Foundry, but I've also got some of our competitors because Spring is not dependent on Cloud Foundry. It can run on all kinds of infrastructure clouds or platform clouds. And of course, we play nicely with other Java frameworks and runtimes. We've got some really cool, nice front-end technology. And of course, Spring Data, Spring XD, that we'll hear a lot more about today, is all about enabling workloads on all kinds of different data backends. So we're about choice, we're about flexibility, we're about enabling you guys to get your apps into production very quickly. So another show of hands, just because I'm curious, who was here for Platform, the Cloud Foundry conference this weekend? Okay, about 30% of the folks. Okay, so I guess you guys are going to be the ones that I don't really need to sell Cloud Foundry or talk too much about Cloud Foundry to. So forgive me that there will be, in the next 20 minutes, some basics about Cloud Foundry. Who's using Cloud Foundry? A few people. Who tried Cloud Foundry last year but haven't touched it since? A few more hands. Okay, good. So I'm hopefully going to give you some information about what we've done in Cloud Foundry in the last year that makes it even more awesome, and in particular, some of the stuff about the new Java build pack. All right, so again, forgive me, we're going to do a very quick 101 on Cloud Foundry. It's not going to be too detailed. We've got some additional talks in this room all day today. We have a track of talks about Cloud Foundry, including how you can build your own if you want to, and how you can extend it. Some of my colleagues will be here talking about those things. So Paul Moritz last night and Adrian talked about the Pivotal family of products and why we spun out from these two companies, EMC and VMware, and why we've brought this particular collection of technologies, Cloud Foundry, Spring, RabbitMQ, Redis, Greenplum, Pivotal HD, Gem5. It sounds like this huge load of stuff, but actually it works really nicely together, and we're doing a lot to make that work. So when we think about Pivotal, what we do here, we have a data fabric, which is represented by things like the Greenplum database, Pivotal HD. We've got a cloud fabric, Cloud Foundry. That's really the core thing that all of our other products can sit on. And then the application fabric, which is in this chart on the same box with the Spring platform and RabbitMQ and so on. And we're really bringing these things together to enable people to work much more productively. And you will have heard Pivotal Labs last night talking about how quickly they were able to deliver that Spring IO website using that collection of technologies. That hasn't really told you what Cloud Foundry is. Cloud Foundry is a platform as a service. And Paul Moritz last night talked about infrastructure as a service, basic cloud technology, VMware vSphere, AWS EC2, those kind of things is what he calls the new hardware, right? When we were looking at technologies that we had at VMware when we were there, in the application space, we kind of thought, what? Infrastructure clouds and virtualization is kind of a done deal, right? It's a solved problem. There's a lot of companies out there and platforms out there, OpenStack and AWS and vSphere, and they're all good, right? They're all good enough or extremely good and really cool. And, what we wanted to do was deliver an operating system for applications on top of that. So that's the platform as a service space. And really what we're looking to do is enable you to forget about the virtual machine as a developer, right? All you really probably want to care about is writing your code. You don't want to be doing a load of automation around installing a virtual machine, installing the packages you need, and then working out how to scale your applications within those virtual machines. The application is the new unit of scale and currency here, right? And in fact, when you scale your applications on Cloud Foundry, it doesn't matter to you. You don't ever know whether it's running on one or more virtual machines with different instances. You might have all of the instances running inside one. You might have them distributed among many, but Cloud Foundry just handles that for you, and the router enables you to do that. Platform as a service is an abstraction layer. It sits on top of infrastructure. In particular with Cloud Foundry, we are agnostic to the infrastructure underneath. We can run on VMware, because that's where we came from, on vSphere. That's what we started with. Last year, if you were at Spring One and you played with cloudfoundry.com, which is what we had then as a hosted service, what you were actually doing was deploying your application to a data center somewhere in Las Vegas, I think, running on vSphere. Because we were VMware, right? And then at the beginning of the year, we came out of VMware, and we looked at the fact that we needed to run Cloud Foundry somewhere, and we decided to run it on AWS. And I think that sends quite a strong message to say, well, actually, you know what? Although we came from VMware, we are independent, and we do have the choice and flexibility. And today, my colleagues and I are working a lot with customers also very, very interested in the OpenStack technology. So we are abstracting away that infrastructure layer. I've mentioned already that the application is your unit of deployment. That's what we think about. That's what we care about. And I will show you an architecture diagram in a moment that shows you kind of some of the internals. I'm not going to spend long on it. But fundamentally, all of that infrastructure, all of those components we've built exist to support the ability for you to deploy and scale applications. We still have the separation between application developers and operations, right? Quite often I talk to companies where their operations team are going, well, what is all this DevOps people? We don't want the developers to have too much control in operations. But fundamentally, there are still people that need to understand how the infrastructure operates. And what they can do is just deliver the platform and enable the developers to deliver the applications. I'm sure many of you have seen deployment diagrams or project diagrams like this. And these are, this isn't an untypical deployment diagram. Even when we're doing agile, right, we still put processes and gates and things in place. And of course, quality control and testing and all those things are important. But we really want to go from, the 18 months or whatever to get a new application in production to actually a couple of sets of steps. That's a tongue twister I invented for myself. So on the left-hand side of this chart, we've got some commands, and what those commands are doing, and this is abbreviated, is actually building a cloud. Okay, it's assuming that we have an infrastructure, we've got an OpenStack or vSphere farm in the organization, and then we use our tool, which is called Cloud Foundry Bosch. We configure it, we provision it, and then when we decide actually we need more machines, virtual machines, more resources, we can run another command just very quickly to add capacity. And typically that can take, maybe 2 to 4 hours. We recently redeployed our entire public Cloud Foundry on Pivotal to Amazon in literally an hour and a half, and redeployed everybody's applications because there was an Amazon outage and we needed to move to a new availability zone. From a developer perspective, what you do, and if you're using the command line, you don't have to, we have other tools. We're going to point at an instance of the cloud. We're going to then just take our application and push it or deploy it to the cloud. And then we might decide, well, actually, this application requires services. It requires a database. It requires messaging. It requires access to SendGrid. It requires monitoring through New Relic. And we can simply create an instance and bind those instances together. I'll actually show you our command line when I get to demos in a moment, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Josh is quite right. These developer commands are run through a Ruby gem called CF. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. Finally, this last command is really cool because if you've been sitting at home writing some cool new app using Spring Android and you've deployed it to the Play Store and you've told some of your friends and it's gone viral, and all of a sudden you need massive backends because you're getting hit far too quickly. Well, all we need to do, rather than say, I'm on Amazon EC2 and I'm going to need to install a load more Amazon EC2 virtual machines, and then I'm going to need to install Spring, and then I'm going to need to install the data. No, we just take scale, app name, and add instances, and we have more instances. And Cloud Foundry, because it's not spinning up a whole new VM for application, it's actually using a container, can do that in less than a second. It can add instances, depending on the size of your application. It's extremely fast. When I talked about Spring right at the beginning in Spring I/O and the fact that it can run in these different environments with these different runtimes and services and databases and so on, the absolute same thing applies to Cloud Foundry. We believe strongly in choice. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, we say, well, whilst we're here this morning talking about Spring, you might want to write your application in .NET or PHP or other things, right? We don't control you. You're free, okay? So how we do that in Cloud Foundry is through something called build packs. And I'll show you, talk about our Java build pack in a moment. So that enables you to use the runtime that you need for your application. So if you have written an application in Erlang or some crazy mad Haskell or R or something, then you can install that runtime as you deploy your application. Last year, if you were here last year, I would have been standing on stage saying, yes, Cloud Foundry is awesome, and you can run your apps in Java or Ruby or Node. And then I would have talked about something else. But what we've done in version 2 of Cloud Foundry is we've added support for additional pluggable runtime. What we've done on the services side, if I was here last year, I would have said, well, you can use any database you like as long as it's MySQL, Postgres, Mongo, Redis, or RabbitMQ, which aren't databases, I know. But anyway, those are the 5 data services we support. What we've done with services is we've enabled you to plug in any service you like. On our Pivotal instance of Cloud Foundry, we have a marketplace with lots of different vendors that you can very quickly plug in. If you run Cloud Foundry in your own business, then you can provide your own services. Maybe you have an Oracle farm already, and we can create a connection out to that and enable your application developers to use it very, very quickly. Again, very important, I keep hammering this home. The important thing here is that we're no longer building these massive stacks that go from the infrastructure upwards all the way to the app. We are literally making the applications much more portable. And in fact, not only that, we can run them on 2 completely different infrastructures. In the UK this year, we have a 2-yearly charity drive called Comic Relief. This is one of these telethon, comedy things where people phone in or use their mobile to pledge donations for charity. And that's kind of a critical application. It's only required once every 2 years, and it's only really required to be up and running for about 9 hours. But if anything goes wrong in that 9 hours, then they've lost the ability to take, donations and lost their core business or ability to operate, right? Opportunity, correct. So what they did was they put Cloud Foundry on a vSphere data center in London, and they also used Amazon in the US. So that even if Amazon went down, we could use vSphere. Even if vSphere went down, we could use Amazon. We had that geographical availability as well. But the key point here was they didn't have to change their applications in any way, and they could operate them using exactly the same set of tools and commands. The application developers were not even aware, or did not need to be aware, that they were running on completely different infrastructures. Really nice that we don't have to make any changes to applications. Josh will show you that shortly. This year, Pivotal will have a packaged commercial product of Cloud Foundry that you can buy from us if you like and run on vSphere in your data center. We also have this new run.pivotal.io platform, which is where the new Spring.io website is working. And we also have other partners around the world who are deploying Cloud Foundry and, again, giving you that choice. So I'm from Europe. Our run.pivotal.io runs on Amazon in the US. If I wanted to deploy to a European-based PaaS, I could choose one like a company called Any9s here, who actually run, again, on vSphere. It doesn't matter to me. The point is, they have a cloud available. I can use the same tools. I can change my target that I'm pointing my application push to, and just go ahead and use them. And finally, say either you don't believe in this cloud thing at all, or you just you're not connected, or you want to run something locally, then we can actually run the entire Cloud Foundry component stack inside a virtual machine on your local laptop. Now, in previous years, we offered this through something called Micro Cloud Foundry. And if you go on the Cloud Foundry website today, there's still a link to that, but we haven't updated it recently. So what we're actually now doing is working with other partners. And there are 2 open source projects. One of them is called the Vagrant installer. If you're familiar with Vagrant, it's a way of spinning up virtual machines and just provisioning them locally and installing everything you need in an automated fashion. So there's a Vagrant installer that will build you a local Cloud Foundry instance in a virtual machine. And you could run that on either VMware, or you could run it on VirtualBox, or whatever you choose. There's also another one from NTT out of Japan, which is a full Bosch deployed version of Cloud Foundry inside a virtual machine. So you can run those locally. You can test your app locally if you want to, with exactly the same look and feel that you would have on a public cloud or a private cloud. And then you can deploy when you're ready into a production environment. Okay, so that's kind of my level set introduction. This is what Cloud Foundry is all about. How are people doing with that description? Any kind of questions about what we're trying to do here? Hi. What Cloud Foundry? How production ready is Cloud Foundry?
Yeah, Cloud Foundry, some of the services, as well as the Cloud Foundry, the private cloud.
Yeah. So the question is, can I describe how production ready Cloud Foundry is, how production ready the private product, PaaS product is, and the services? So, sure. So we have customers around the world running Cloud Foundry in production today. I haven't gone and put a slide in this deck with lots of logos. That wasn't what I was coming to talk about as such today. We've just had the platform conference this weekend, and we had lots of them. Rakuten out of Japan, a couple of companies out of China. Baidu, the China search engine, is running 1 billion page views a day for their advertising platform through Cloud Foundry. We've got many customers doing this in production today. Run.pivotal.io, it's entirely up to you whether you want to run production workloads there. As I will show you in a moment, what we have today is a 60-day free trial for users, and we will then have billing. It will be like something like Heroku with a credit card, and we'll have different tiers and qualities of service. Today, everything on Cloud Foundry on run.pivotal.io is services with a free tier. And those free tiers may be limited in size. Let's say, 20 gigs of data storage or something. You'd have to look at the plans. The third question was about the private PaaS product. And Pivotal will launch something this year for codename Pivotal 1, which will contain a number of components, including Cloud Foundry. But that is not commercially available today, although we are working with companies on our beta program already. Thanks. All right, so, yeah, another question. Hi. So Spring.io is one of them, right? Absolutely. I mean, we've obviously been developing in there for a while in private. So no, I don't, because at the moment, for the broad number of developers, it's a free trial period. So after that, we'll see who comes on board. So that's where we are. No worries. So what's new since this time last year when we were up in Washington? Well, everything actually. Literally, it's a whole new world. I've been sat with Josh working with him. No, don't go there. I'm really good at that song on one of the singing games, SingStar or whatever, that kind of stuff. I know, sorry. So I've literally been sat with Josh recently, working with him, preparing this. And Josh, bless him, is a simple guy.
It's true.
He likes his coffee, and he, he's been really Spring. As you heard last night, the Spring team has been super busy. I've been seeing, the blog updates with all the new milestone releases. We've been, charging towards last night's reveal of Spring.io and the website. So Josh has been really busy and hasn't spent a whole lot of time with Cloud Foundry lately. So I kind of had to hold his hand through some of the changes. There's been a lot that's happened since last year. So if you have looked at Cloud Foundry before and you haven't looked at it, I don't know, for 3 or 4 months, then there's some mind-blowing new cool stuff. So the first thing is that we now are at what we call version 2, or it was formerly codenamed kind of Next Gen NG. And what that brings with it is a number of really important and very cool features. One of them is kind of important if you work in a team. So we have something called organizations and spaces. And you saw that if you were at the keynote last night very briefly, and I'll show it off again in a moment. What that enables is going from the model that we had last year. When you signed up, you had an account, you had a quota, it was entirely related to you as an individual. And then if you wanted anybody else to operate your application or stop or start it, you had to give them your password. Not so secure. So what we have now is an entirely new model that enables teams to collaborate through something called organizations. Organizations can have many members and can have different quotas and permissions, and I can give Josh access to my organization but not let him delete or stop or start my apps, just view them and so on. So that's really important. The other thing we have in there is spaces, and spaces are a way of actually segregating applications between environments. So we have, for example, and you can call them anything you like, but we have, for example, development and staging and production, and then we can move our applications between those different environments. And we actually scope the services with those spaces as well. So our production database is visible to applications in our staging space. We've rewritten a lot of the components, but one of the really important ones we've rewritten is the router, which sits on the front of Cloud Foundry. And the router's been completely rewritten since this time last year. We originally implemented it using a Lua plugin to Nginx. And what we've now done is we kind of said, well, that gives us all the limitations of Nginx. Nginx is awesome, but up until relatively recently, sort of about 11 months ago, it didn't have any WebSocket support. So we rewrote the router, and we rewrote it fully in a language called Go. And because Go is kind of a cool language, actually, and it's built for concurrency, we've actually got 4 times performance improvement. We're not going through like a plugin interface into Nginx from Lua and stuff. 4 times performance improvement just on the front end and its ability to route your requests. And this is something that makes my friend here very happy. Sorry, I'm getting a bit too close to him this morning. WebSockets, okay? And we saw that when Dave Sire showed off his app yesterday with Spring Boot. So we now have full support for WebSockets, and that's going to work brilliantly with the new support in the Spring Framework 4. New DEAs. Well, what are DEAs? Well, DEAs stand for Droplet Execution Agent. And these are the containers where your applications run on Cloud Foundry. So what we've done since last year was we've completely rewritten the DEA. Previously, we had a separate component called a stager. When you push your application, it was responsible for going off and working out what bits were needed and then transferring it to the Droplet Execution Agent. What we've done is we've collapsed those 2 concepts, so the stager is now built into the DEA. And we've also given it support for build packs. Now, I mentioned previously that build packs give you this ability for pluggable runtimes. But what's really cool about build packs is that we've shared the specification with one of the other platform as a service providers, Heroku. So Heroku is a closed source. It's owned by Salesforce now. It's a very, very cool platform, very, very nice. They've actually just launched a new website this morning as well, which looks really nice. But what they did a while ago, they started off as a Ruby-based PaaS, and they decided they wanted to be able to add runtimes more easily. So they created this build pack specification. They made it open source. As the open source community does, lots of people went and made build packs to support to scratch their favorite itch. Well, I want a runtime for a Haskell application. I don't know why I keep coming back to that, but Haskell seems to be the way forward in my opinion. Did you just laugh at me?
Yes.
That's rude. Oh, no, you're right. Okay. The nice thing is we can take any of those build packs that were built for Heroku and we can run them on Cloud Foundry. So if you've got an application today that runs on Heroku, it's pretty trivially easy to port to Cloud Foundry. There are one or two differences between the way that we implement the build packs, but broadly speaking, you can now bring any application that runs on Heroku onto Cloud Foundry. That's massively increased our scope. This time last year, we had 3 language runtimes and frameworks, and if you wanted to add any others, you had to fork the entire Cloud Foundry codebase, build the support in, and then, by the way, either try and submit it back to us, and last year we weren't so good at dealing with pull requests, or build your own Cloud Foundry and run it there. So if you wanted to run a PHP app, you needed to go to one of our partners who had specifically built-in PHP support. Now you can run on any Cloud Foundry instance with any runtime you want with a build pack. The last thing I think it kind of related to the build packs about extensibility is that we've now kind of reworked our services support. Very, very often, if I was talking to a company that was interested in implementing their own private platform as a service, they'd say to me, hey, well, how can we connect to our Oracle apps? What we've now got is something called user-provided services. So we have the ability to plug in those existing data services. It's really hard, given the massive variety of data services available, for us to know how to host and scale all of them properly, right? So it's much better for us to say, hey, Oracle or Mongo Labs or whoever you are, you know how to scale your own technology. We'll leave you to do that. We're happy to connect to you through your interfaces, but you know what? You should go ahead and do that yourselves. And we also have on our Run Pivotal IO platform the marketplace, which I will show you in just a moment. Very, very quick architecture diagram before we start showing some code and doing some demos. This is kind of the componentry to Cloud Foundry, and honestly, my hope is that as Spring developers, none of you really need to know this, okay? But this is kind of what it is. It's a set of loosely coupled components, addressable over HTTP REST connections that talk to one another. I haven't drawn the entire flow of everything here, but we have the router at the front. We have something called the cloud controller, which is what you talk to when you run your Cloud Foundry admin commands on the command line or through STS. We have a security service called the UAA, which is written in Spring, by the way. We have the DEAs, which is where the applications run. And at the bottom, we've got this thing called BOSH. So BOSH is actually our installer and our abstraction layer for talking to the infrastructure. It lets us say, you know what, I want to use 8 VMs over there. I want a cloud controller, 3 execution engines, a health manager. Go ahead, install it for me now. And then it will spin up and take a few hours, but that's the command that does that for us. Okay, so enough talking for me for now, although I will do a little bit of talking as I actually spin up this demo. I was going to show you very quickly what the new platform looks like. Let's see what Josh has open in his browser. Nothing embarrassing yet. Oh, sure. Would you like me to use that instead? Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to give you a tour of what the Cloud Foundry user interface looks like. By the way, we didn't have this last year either. So we have a whole new web console that you can actually kind of see and work out what's going on, which I think is really nice. I'm just going to go ahead and log into my account on the cloud. If you are here and you want to get an account, then we have the hoodie push-a-thon again. So if you've never got the nice, cool, brown, warm, but kind of, stylistically cool brown
In a way that brown hoodies are.
brown pre-shaped yak hoodie, then you can get one of those by signing up. If you click on create an account, I believe the code is Spring 1. I'll need to double check that. What's my password? Oh, it's that thing, isn't it? Right, let's go. Okay, so we're logging into the console, and let's have a quick look. I'm going to, at the top here, we've got, I'm just going to get rid of this free trial message. At the top here, we've got a drop-down which lets me choose an organization. So I've got two organizations. One is my manager's organization. You can see on the right-hand side here all the different users. I could probably go and edit this and remove Scott Frederick's permissions on everything, which would be really funny for his demo later. Or I'm going to go ahead and switch to my own organization so I don't accidentally delete Scott from Pivotal. That would be upsetting to all of us. So in my demo, my organization, I've called it apiper-org. That's really, I felt like that was original. You know, it really expressed who I am.
Did you think about it as really in the one someday that we can say?
Yeah. And across, you see on this bar here, I've got these app spaces. So I've got development, I've got production, I've got staging, and again, I can just click between them. I've actually got no apps in my staging space right now. I can add them. So these are effectively just labels that let me partition my environment into separate sections. You'll see though that as well as apps in staging, it says no apps in this app space. It says no services. So again, I mentioned earlier that when we create these spaces, we are scoping our applications and our services to those spaces. So if we have a database that contains test data, then we are going to scope that to our, let's say, development or staging environment, not to our production environment. Let me go back to development and just step through some of these apps and just give you an idea of what we have here. Apparently, I'm a fan of PHP. Who knew? So one of the apps here, in fact, is quite interesting. This bottom app here, which TWICF, this is actually a blog. This is our This Week in Cloud Foundry blog. So if I've just clicked through to it. I didn't follow the link to the app itself, but I've clicked through here, and I can see that it's running, which is good, because it means my blog is available. I've got 2 instances running, which is good, because if we as the operators who run Pivotal need to move your app for operational reasons, then we'll always do it in such a way that one of your instances will always be available. So by having 2 app instances there, it means I've got some availability. I know what memory is available. It doesn't tell me what runtime I'm using on this particular console. I happen to know this is a Ruby app. It's written in, it's an application called Octopress, which is a very lightweight way of publishing a blog using Markdown. This app requires no services. I can see my 2 instances. The other interesting thing here, though, look, is these URLs. So by default, every app that we deploy to run.pivotal.io gets a .cfapps.io subdomain, a top-level domain. I've actually mapped my own domain because I'd like my blog to be available at thisweekincf.com. Hey, this is This Week in Cloud Foundry. You should read it. It's not quite as cool as This Week in Spring, primarily because I haven't yet got to the point where I publish it on the same day every week. And some weeks I don't publish it at all because I'm traveling too much. But I'm learning everything I know from Josh. I was inspired by Josh's This Week in Spring. This Week in Cloud Foundry is there for your pleasure, delight, and information. So again, last year, we didn't have custom domains. We kept saying to everyone, yes, custom domains are coming. Hey guys, they're here. You can do that now. You can run your app on your own domain. Yay, go us. All right. So that was, the other really important thing, and Nima is at the back there, and he'll be very upset if I don't talk about this, is our marketplace. So we can go through to our marketplace, and thanks to the hard work of people like the gentleman by the door, we've got a group of great partners who really know how to make these services work, how to scale them in production. We've got, for example, Elephant SQL down here. We've got Redis Cloud. We've got Mongo Lab. Once again, right? If I want to run a cluster of Mongo servers inside Cloud Foundry, I need to know how to operate that. It's much easier for me to say, you know what? I just want to click through here, plan options. Now, at the moment, as I mentioned, all of these have a free plan, and they haven't got their paid plans available yet. I know that I'll be running in their sandbox with nearly 500 meg of storage. I get backups there. I've got continuous monitoring available. If I select this plan, I can go ahead and create a new Mongo instance. I can assign it to a space. Again, that's going to scope its visibility to that space. And then I could bind it to an application that's running. I'm not going to do that right now. I am going to do one thing before I switch back to the slide deck. Oh, that's better. It is running a few. How are people feeling with looking at that console? Are you following what I'm showing you? Yeah? Anytime you've got questions during the week, by the way, then we'll be hanging around in the demo lounge. Also on the mezzanine here, you'll see that there's kind of little circles of beanbags with flags. Those are kind of areas where we'll have pivotal people to come and help you. Some of us have got Cloud Foundry t-shirts. Some of us are wearing Spring or other t-shirts on. So you should be able to identify us, but do come and talk to us and we can walk you through any of this stuff. Hi. Yeah, the relationship between application and services, that's a great question. Let me show you. Which of these? So I'm going to click through to this one, Tiny Tiny. Tiny Tiny has a service bound to it, and it's an Elephant SQL service. So what I'm saying here is Tiny Tiny is an application. I happen to know it's a PHP application, and that application actually requires a database. So I've bound a Postgres database to it. So all we're doing here is we're saying, you know, I as a developer need to access data in my application, whether that's SQL or NoSQL database, whether that's something like New Relic that's actually externally monitoring me that we want to have a plugin for in our application. An important point to note is that there is not necessarily a one-to-one relationship, right? So I can bind multiple applications to the same service. That's kind of important when we're talking about like message queuing, right? So we want to be passing AMQP messages on RabbitMQ, then we might want multiple applications to be looking at the same message broker so we can do that message passing and actually orchestrate our applications. It also means we can decompose our applications, right? We can have modules that are written in an appropriate language and framework. Maybe we have one written in Groovy, one written in Java, one written in Ruby for whatever reason. And they can all interoperate either via HTTP or messaging. Does that help? Great. I'm going to show you some more with services as we go through. Absolutely. Again, yeah, we can have multiple services per app. So that was my first kind of just walkthrough of what we have available on run.pivotal.io. What I want to do now is talk about what we're all here for, which is Spring and Java. Because when we first launched run.pivotal.io, what we did was we said, you know what? We need to provide the same experience that our users from the previous version 1, expected. And that was a Node runtime for JavaScript apps, a Ruby runtime, and a Java runtime. And we said, well, you know, these build packs, we borrowed them from Heroku. Let's go grab Heroku's build packs. They work. So they work well enough. Just calm, relax, deep breaths. So we forked the Heroku build packs and we took them and we installed them on Cloud Foundry and they worked, which is what we expected, what we hoped, and gave you guys a relatively good experience. But then what we did was we set the walking god in human form that is Ben Hale on the problem, okay? How many people here know Ben, have seen Ben speak before? Right. So unfortunately, Josh and I wanted to be at his talk, which is on right now, but we had to come do this one. So he gave a great demo at our platform conference this weekend, live demo of the Java build pack. So the Spring team have fully rewritten the Java build pack, so you're getting everything you expect from the Spring team, right? Super cool, super simple, just works, highly configurable, highly extensible, right? So we have a choice of containers in there. And of course, we're ready for Spring I/O, right? So we've got support for the web container. We've got support for Rails and Play and Groovy and so on. We also have support for what Dave Sire showed off last night, which is the Spring Boot and Java main loader, right? So what did he say last night? He's been waiting to enable a Spring app that you could just write a static main method in. So we have the Java main runner in there as well. It's highly configurable. It's got some great documentation. If you go to blog.cloudfoundry.com, scroll back about 3 entries, I think, because we've had a load of news this week. There's a blog post from Ben about how the team built this. They built it in association with the Cloud Foundry team. Obviously, they came and paired with us in Pivotal Labs in San Francisco, worked very, very closely with us. And also the documentation on GitHub is excellent, really nicely broken down. If you want to add additional runtimes, and other people have already forked it, and if you want to, for some reason, go ahead and use DropWizard or Jonas or something like that as your container, then you can find someone's already done that for you. So there's the blog entry from Ben, and there's the GitHub repo there to go take a look at. And again, I'm going to come back to this theme that we have of choice, right? We're actually partnering very closely with a number of companies on the open source Cloud Foundry project. One of the big ones is IBM. They've recently joined us, primarily because they've doubled down on OpenStack as their enterprise cloud of choice. So they've said, hey, you know what? they looked around at the other platform players in the market, and they said, you know what? Cloud Foundry seems to be going in the right direction. We're going to go with them.
Can I just interject?
If you wish. Would you like the mic?
Yeah. I just want to put this out here. What he's saying is very important. I personally have had what I will call IBM Tourette's. I have in the past been unable to say nice things about IBM. I just physically am not capable of it. But then they did this. I mean, they actually worked very, very, very hard on a very, very cool open source Liberty compliant build pack. And it really works beautifully. Liberty is actually very small and svelte, so it turned out very nicely. Not the IBM you guys may know. This is really awesome stuff. If you get a chance to check it out, please do.
I really, again, I'm going to just refer back to our platform conference this weekend. Rob Mee, the head of Pivotal Labs, gave a closing address and was talking about, I'm just going to repeat Rob's story. It's not my story, it's Rob's story. And I feel slightly guilty about stealing it. But he said that he grew up in an IBM family. He worked, his dad was with IBM Storage for a long time. And when EMC came along, he felt that, his dad could call them a fierce competitor. EMC really kind of upturned, the storage market in the 90s for IBM. And then Rob went off and set up Pivotal Labs. And then Pivotal Labs got acquired by EMC. Awkward. But anyway, what he closed off by saying, look, hey, we've got these guys from IBM working with us now, both on Cloud Foundry, both on collaborating with us on things like on a WebSphere build pack for Cloud Foundry. And he said, what we're doing with this new Pivotal organization, with Cloud Foundry, with Spring, is not fiercely competing, it's fierce collaboration. And I really love that little soundbite he left us with yesterday. So IBM, literally a couple of days ago, open source contributed a build pack for their WebSphere Liberty runtime. So if WebSphere is your poison, then go do. All right. I just thought that was the kind of Tourette's type thing you'd say.
Gentle,
yeah.
gentle, fade away.
Okay. Anyway, let's take another look at doing some stuff, right? Because that is what we are here for. So I've got two apps to show you this morning. Command++, yes, very good idea. Let's make this a lot bigger.
You guys see in the back?
How's that doing? Yeah? Good. I'm doing my best with it. I think that could just about do it. Let's see if I can make the...
Any questions thus far?
I think...
Why are we here? What does it all mean? What's this about? These kinds of things? Sure.
All right, so who am I logged in as? First of all, I'm going to do a bunch of stuff with the command line, and then Josh is going to take over from me and show you some cool stuff, some actual code and what you can do with Spring, and some STS stuff as well. So let me remind myself where I am. So first thing to mention is we have this tool, which is a command line tool called CF. And Josh was absolutely right to point out that it's a Ruby gem. So if you want to use this tool, first of all, you need a decent installation of Ruby on your machine, and then you can simply type gem install CF, and it will pull down all the stuff for you. We also announced this weekend that we are in the process of rewriting this so that it will be a statically linked binary written in Go, so you won't have to install all the Ruby stuff. But right now we are running with a Ruby version of CF. So I'm just going to type cftarget, and what cftarget will do is go ahead and tell me which Cloud Foundry instance I'm pointing at, and also who I'm logged in as and what organization I'm talking to. So here we go. I'm logged into the Pivotal Cloud, api.run.pivotal.io. Mentioning that we're using version 2 of Cloud Foundry, that's good. I'm logged in as me, that's also excellent. I'm targeting the staging space, and I'm working in my boss's organization right now. If I type CF apps, it's going to tell me what applications are available already running there, and lots of them. So one of the things I'm going to do is go ahead and delete them, because otherwise it's going to look a bit like I'm trying to pull the wool over your eyes. So let's do CF delete the ones I want to actually show you today. Spring Music, time boot, web, UI. Do you want to do any tap dancing or anything while I'm doing this?
Actually, I want to just slight tangent. How many of you guys have heard of Timely? Completely not related to this at all? Just wondering. Cool.
All right, well, it gets rid of those. Yes, delete them all, please. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy two applications. One of them is going to be an application that you can find in our GitHub repository. It's under the organization Cloud Foundry-samples. So if you go to github.com/Cloud Foundry-samples, we have some example apps in there. They're not all Spring applications, but this one is. It's called Spring Music. I'm not going to delete the databases right now. Written by that man over there, I believe, Mr. Scott Frederick. So if you see the Spring Music app and you think, oh my God, I could build a business on that, I need to talk to that guy, go talk to Scott. He'll be happy to accept your stock options. And once I've done that, I'm going to show you the super cool stuff we're doing with Spring Boot. So I've just got rid of those applications, so I don't have them running on Cloud Foundry anymore. That's a good move. And let's go into Spring Music. So Spring Music is written with different profiles in mind. So it's gonna do some stuff with the database. I've already built it, by the way. I've already done Gradle WAssemble, so I have a jar file a WAR file that I can deploy. And also we have something here called a manifest file. If I look at this manifest file, this is basically a Cloud Foundry deployment descriptor. It is not required that you have one of these when you deploy an application in Cloud Foundry. The first time you type cf push, it will ask you a bunch of questions. You respond to those questions. It will then say, do you want to save that? And you say yes, and it will save this little file. The reason I have this file pre-saved is not particularly to save myself answering all the questions. It's because we have this kind of cool little thing in here. So we have, on the host line, this is the line which is going to define what the host name of my application will be. What we have here is this $random word decorator. And what that's going to do is actually generate a small random set of characters so that I know that my host name is unique when I push to Cloud Foundry. If we all push Spring-Music to cfapps.io, it's not going to work. One of it will work for one person, then everyone else it will say, hey, that route's already defined for someone, so you've got to choose another name. So that's just a really nice little thing that you can do with a manifest file, which it's all documented on the Cloud Foundry documentation site. That's going to allow us to push this app. So let me go ahead and push it. And it's saying it's picked up that manifest file already. It's created the application, Spring Music. That's my name locally for it. But it's also created this route, and here we go with the random characters, df585.blah, right? So it's bound that route on the router, and now it's actually uploading the application. What's going to happen here is it's going to take my WAR file, it's going to upload it to Cloud Foundry, find a DEA that is empty at the moment, install all the Spring pieces it needs to run this application. We should see that in a moment, I hope. As it prepares to start, we'll see it download the JDK, grab the Open JDK.
I love this part. Remember, Cloud Foundry has absolutely no idea about your Java application by default. Something has to come in and identify it, package it, do the right thing, set it up, and place it into existence. And that's this build pack action.
So what the Java build pack's doing at this point is it's saying, hey, what kind of application is this? Because I can package all kinds of Java apps, Spring apps, right? So what it's doing is it's saying, okay, well, I know this is a WAR file, so it's going to be a web app. If it was a Spring Boot app, which I'll show you in a moment, it will work out that it's a Spring Boot app, and it will install the Java main runner. Yeah. The DEA. Yeah, so actually, thank you. That's a great question. So what granularity can the DEA go to when it discovers, works out what kind of app we're deploying, right? Okay, so this is all documented in the Java build pack documentation, but essentially what it's doing is it's going through a series of steps to determine whether you have, for example, a manifest ML file, or a WebInf directory, or class files, or it will do some discovery. So the Spring team have done quite a bit of work on actually trying to help the build pack have some intelligence there. There we go, it has started, good. It's actually listed in the documentation, the kind of series of checks it will do to work out what kind of framework you're running. You can override it. So you can actually say, you know what, although I've got a WebInf directory, don't assume that this is a web app. Actually, it's a boot app or whatever. You can actually configure it. Again, it's documented in there how that's done. So, yeah, hi.
So there are two aspects. One is the dependencies.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're not uploading the dependencies, right?
Are we uploading the dependencies?
The first time, sure.
Right, so we're getting stuff, and you should actually see that it's getting stuff from an S3 bucket here. So it's getting stuff from a local cache. It's also installed, just to quickly step through this, it's installed something called auto reconfiguration, and which Josh will talk about in a little bit. It's also installed Tomcat, because it knows it needs Tomcat to run a WAR file, and some additional build pack Tomcat support there. So we do that the first time.
And the application dependencies, those also get uploaded. Yes.
So we've uploaded, when we uploaded the app package, no, we're not. That's okay. So we're not uploading the source code. This is something that confused somebody on Twitter recently. Although it's called a build pack, we're not doing the build on the server side. So I said I'd already done the Gradle WAssemble on my laptop before I'd pushed the WAR file.
Something of a misnomer, maybe one pack is a better name.
It's because the build pack terminology came from Heroku in some ways. Right. Well, wait. Is that
the WAR you build is made and installed, or Gradle built, or Ansible, whatever. That's what you push. You don't have every jar you need in the web directory just as normal, right? You're building a web application. If you're building a Spring Boot application, you'll upload the dependencies to that as well. Yeah.
So let's just prove this is available. Now I mentioned this app has a load of different profiles. Can I just do open URL? There we go. Is it going to open it or not? There we go. Let's try that instead. Spring Music, the beauty that is the Spring Music app. It's a set of albums. Now this is because I didn't give it a database when I uploaded it. I didn't say, by the way, you should bind to a database. It's already installed itself with the in-memory profile. So you'll see that at the top here it's saying I'm using the cloud profile, which enables me to run Cloud Foundry, and I'm using the in-memory profile. So all of this stuff is just coming from an in-memory cache. So if I delete stuff and then I restart the application, it's going to come back. It's going to be repopulated from the in-memory cache. You see that where it says services here, it's not listing any services. I'm not bound to any databases at all, okay? But I can do some nice things like kind of sorting my record collection differently and so on. So simple app. Source code's available in the Cloud Foundry samples repo, so you can go take a look at it. Scott, what is this? Well, look at this formatting. Come on, man. Responsive design, dude. Okay. All right. So if anybody wants to help Scott with his design, then go fork the repo and send us a pull request. That'd be great. Right. So I've deployed Spring Music, and I deployed it. Let's remind myself into the JWaters org and into the staging space, and I can find Spring Music. Okay. So I've got one instance running, but no services. So you know what? I'd like some services. I'd like a database, and I would like to monitor it using New Relic. So let's go. I've got a New Relic service already created. So let's bind that. And the service is successfully bound. I can see that that's there. And I'm going to also bind an Elephant SQL database. I wish I'd named these more sensibly so I could remember whether I was using them already. Actually, I can't be using them already. So let's do that. Now, when I restart this, I have to restart it for those changes to be picked up. It's going to take longer to start. So if you sat there going, oh gosh, what's gone wrong? It will take longer to start, and two reasons for that. One of them is it needs to install the New Relic agent, and you'll see that happen. The other thing is that it's now going to connect to an Elephant SQL database, which is in another cloud somewhere. All right, so let's go off and just quickly restart my Spring Music app. Looking at the same manifest file, we haven't made any changes to the manifest file, but on the server side, we have added some services. But it is going to have to restage it, and this comes back to this gentleman's point. So it's going to have to, although it's got the build pack cache, which is where the application was already downloaded, it is now having to install fresh the New Relic agent, because it's detected that we're using New Relic. Hi. I could have restarted from the web, absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm aiming in my bit of the demo to do stuff in the command line, and Josh will do stuff in STS. But I could have done that on the web, you're right, absolutely. The other thing is, by doing it at the command line, I get to show you the fact that, hey, look, this is cool. It knows it's got a New Relic service bound. It's installing the agent for us.
You know, now that we have WebSockets, we can actually show that same thing on the console and the web now.
Yep. So we're running. Hurrah. Let's go over and refresh our Spring Music app. And up here, if I click on this again, we're now using an RDBMS profile. So we know that we've bound to an RDBMS. We know that look at that. This guy's a professional. What can I say? Always work with Joshua Long. He's a genius. So we've got a New Relic service and an Elephant SQL service there. So in fact, now, if I did change things, and I didn't show you this before, if I did decide that I wanted to delete the Nirvana from my collection, oh no, 404, why? That's bad. Okay, well okay, maybe deleting wasn't such a great idea, but I did that. So what was I going to show you? I was going to show you the fact that this is now bound to new relic. Yeah. Oh no, why is it saying 0 health? That's silly. That's wrong as well. Let's go back to my staging space. Something went wrong. I'm guessing there's network issues.
Imagine at a conference.
Wow, shocking, huh? Never happens. Spring Music. Just to prove that Spring Music is still running. It's not running. Network issues. Oh, cool. Huh? I did not.
I did.
Potentially, let's see. I can. But that's relatively conclusive. Let's switch to Spring 1.2GX instead and see if that's any better. Okay. Joshua's iPhone, look at that. Oh, I still clicked on the wrong thing. Live demos. Why do we do live demos at Spring 1? That's really silly. Why can't we record things? It's because Adrian says we always have to do live demos and look silly.
Network, of course, is going to be sort of inherently flaky. And of course, building on top of lots and lots of turtles. So when you get unbalanced with fall, that's okay. Just refresh.
That's an excellent question, Josh. I'm going to blame him anyway, but I'm going to stop it and restart it and make sure.
Questions while we're struggling in a tormented state up here? Anything? Yeah. That'd be awesome.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Oh, right. So in that manifest file, if I wanted to deploy it directly and bind it to a service, then in the manifest file I could have included those settings. Or if I'd not had a manifest file, I could have deployed it and answered all the questions, and it would ask me, do you want a service? And I could say, yes, please. And it would say, what service? And it would give me a list of all the ones available. And I would say, I'd like Elephant SQL, please. And it would bind it for me. So absolutely. I'm just doing this to show you that this is a Spring app that with zero changes has picked up that there are now services available. I may not be able to finish this particular part of the demo right now, I'm guessing, and I may be about to move on to the Spring Boot app instead.
And by the way, you mentioned something I wanted to speak to, which is right now the build pack supports Tomcat 7, the latest and greatest Tomcat ever. It's very easy to specify. It's very easy to specify alternative runtimes. If you want to, for example, use a different revision of Tomcat, or if you want to use a different container altogether, you can fork the build pack and then plug that in yourself. You don't have to get it accepted by us or anything. You can actually specify it when you're uploading your application. And so you get the ability to, for example, when Tomcat 8, the gloriously awesome hero of the revolution that is Tomcat 8, when that debuts, you can just move to that if you like, without waiting for us to update our stuff on the side. Come on. Target, just tab. Awkward. Yeah. Okay. So the gentleman in the front reminds us that the Spring 1 code does indeed work if you want to create. Yeah. Thank you. The code works if you need it.
Right. So yeah. So if you want to get a free account now, then if you go to the web page, use the invitation code Spring1, all in lowercase, then you'll automatically be approved. So what I'm going to do, I'm sorry about the previous one. I was going to show you the new relic stuff working, and it does work. I promise. I had it working last week. I'm hoping that the network is sufficiently recovered. I'm going to push a Spring Boot app instead. So what I did with the Spring Boot app, I'd never used Spring Boot. I know Dave Sire very well. I've been following Spring Boot. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a relatively Spring newbie, right? I worked for IBM for 10 years, and I know that other stuff, but I'm not quite so springy as you guys. So I was really excited by Spring Boot and the concept of Spring Boot, the ability to really quickly get started with, as they said last night, an opinion, and then have that get out of the way and just help you to get started and build out. So I forked I cloned, I should say, the Spring Boot repository on GitHub. Downloaded it. Inside there's a directory called Spring Boot samples. I went in there. There's a load of different samples. What I've got here is a simple one, which is going to use the Timeleaf UI framework. So it's going to put up a nice web interface for me. And you'll see that it's actually built when I did a Maven package on it, install on it, it created a jar file for me.
By the way, speaking to the gentleman's point earlier about dependencies, that's a big fat jar with lots of other jars. So it's got all your dependencies there. That's why you're wondering how the thing is going to have any hope of working with some other technologies.
That is a big fat jar. Check that out. That's a big jar. Yeah, so Spring Boot, again, because we're using the Java main runner now, it's putting all the dependencies in the jar so that it's going to be a standalone thing that can start up its own embedded web server and run on the server side. So, now, of course, I did control. Right. So I'm going to CF push this one instead. And this time I haven't got a manifest file here, so it's going to ask me some questions. So what do I want to call this? Let's call it time demo. But I have pointed it at the jar file itself.
Time, of course, refers to Timeleaf, which is a Vue technology for rendering HTML and HTML5 templates. It's really awesome. It's whole galaxy is better than JSP. Do you guys remember when we had to use JSP on purpose, and then people started implementing alternatives like Velocity, and that was like 10 plus years ago, and Spring was, of course, very quick to support anything but JSP as well as JSP. We made it very easy to move away. Well, now Timeleaf, somebody in the community, a guy named Daniel, has created an amazing Vue templating technology, and we have great support for that in Spring, and this is the templating technology that the application is using. Do check it out if you can.
By the way, if you want me to show you the stuff I was going to show you in the Spring Music demo, I've just stopped because I want to move on and let Josh do his thing. Come see me tomorrow, almost all tomorrow morning. I'm going to be in the demo lounge at the end of the hallway. So I'm happy to go through that with you and show you that it really does work and I'm not just a big fat liar on stage waving my hands around. So, okay, I've just deployed this. This one doesn't need any services. It's, again, if you can see the text, I've answered a couple of questions. It's created a route. The actual DNS route for me. It's bound it ready to bind that to the app. And it's now asking me, do I want any services? I don't have any database services required for this one. It's a standalone web app with no data. So I'll just say no. It's then going to say, do you want to take any of your existing services and bind them to the application? This is each time it's doing this, it's doing REST calls to the cloud controller. And again, we're kind of subject to Josh's 3G connection right now. LTE connection. Wow. Wow, look at you. Posh. Right, I'm going to save that anyway, and that's going to create that manifest file just in case I wanted to look at it later. And it's going to go ahead and do that push again, during which I'm going to do jazz hands. I should have bought my tap dancing shoes. Question over here. Hi. Yes. So, right, great question. Do I see the manifest being a template in large organizations? The manifests are actually very sophisticated. You can do several things with manifest. I've showed you a really simple one, but manifests can also contain service information. They can also do those randomization type things with placeholders. They can also contain environment variables if you need environment variables for your app to be defined on the cloud side. You can have multi-part manifests. So I can say, you know what? I've got three applications that form my application, or three components that form my application. And I used that example earlier where I said one might be written in Groovy and one might be written in Java and one might be written in Node or something. So I can actually have a manifest file that defines how to deploy that entire set of components that need to talk to one another. So there's documentation about this on the Cloud Foundry website, docs.cloudfoundry.com. And absolutely, I mean, I see this as something that teams would share between environments. You obviously make some edits, but it's our way of enabling that. I mean, you don't want to be going through all of those questions every time, right? And again, I mean, you saw a question up there about memory sizes. You know, maybe in my test environment, I might have a smaller memory capacity that was available to me.
You can also scale instances accordingly.
Right.
Question, sir?
Yeah.
So you mentioned it's a big fetch job. Do you know the size of that fetch?
What was it? 116 meg or something? I think it. Well, I did an LSL on it, didn't I? The jar here was. What is that? 11 or 116? My maths is terrible. Well, okay, sorry. Yeah. Timeleaf, T-H-Y-M-E, Leaf. That's what this app is using, if it ever uploads. It may not. Do you want to do some other slides in the meantime? I'm gonna at this point hand you over to my very attractive, very intelligent colleague. Yeah, right. I should give you this, really. You want this? People want to hear you.
I'll take us home. We've got 15 minutes in which to cover 50 slides. Hold on to your seats. Let's see. Right then. I'll take that. Thank you. So Andy was absolutely correct in saying that Cloud Foundry has changed a lot since the last revision. I think the NG appellation is very, very apt. It's definitely epic. It's definitely bigger, better, badder, faster. You know. Do you guys remember the first Star Trek? And then they created the new one and they added NG to it. And you thought, well, that's a bit audacious. I mean, it can't be that good. They have a great theme song, but it can't be that good. And then it was actually that good. It was better even. It was next generation good. That's why this is an epic name change. It really is a whole world of better. But from the Spring perspective, you guys don't have to change too much when you build applications for it. We've done a lot to make sure that it's fairly simple for you guys to move your applications to Cloud Foundry. If you've done it before, then this will feel, if you've programmed it before using the Cloud Foundry APIs, this will feel very familiar. Let's go ahead and revisit deployment. How many of you, by show of hands, use Eclipse? Me too, by the way, by the by. Just wanted to make sure. So while I love the command line, and the command line is a great place to be if you like that kind of thing, I fancy myself more civilized. I like to remain inside of my IDE and get things done as opposed to screwing around with commands on the command line. So we're going to go ahead and use the recently, very, very recently updated Eclipse integration for Cloud Foundry. I've got it loaded here. So let's see what we can do. I need an application. What do you recommend? We can try Spring Music, but that hasn't worked so well. Scott. Okay. Okay. He's convinced me. He twisted my arm. Let's try the network. Let's fix that. I'm going to go back to... Sorry? Really? That's not what I wanted, although that's interesting. Boy. Demo's in here, right? Okay. So we should kill this guy. Do I kill it? Yeah. Oh, it tortures me to do so. Okay. So here we are. We have the freshly built Spring Music example. We'll go ahead and do that now. Well, okay, it's good. So, okay. We'll go ahead and import this inside of STS. Import, I think. Where did they move the Gradle support to? Thank you. Too early, guys. Too early. No Gradle. So let's try something else. Yeah. Will that deploy? Hey. Existing projects in the workspace. Yeah, no, I'm going to go ahead. Like so? I would love to. Wait, sure. Where's the existing project? You want to try that one? Could be fun. And you don't think so? Is there an easier way to get this in there? Thank you. This worked yesterday, then we updated. I changed my STS, and here we are. Okay, so Gradle. There it is. Yes. Wait for it. Okay. Clearly not enough coffee. Damn right. So let's take a look at the code in the interim, because that's sort of what I want to show you anyway. We're going to use this because we can. The code itself is fairly typical Spring MVC. You know, nothing particularly fancy about it. It happens to use profiles. How many of you have used Spring's profiles feature introduced in Spring 3.1 some 2 years ago? The idea here is you have the ability to tag groups of different beans and say, okay, this set of beans should be activated and run in this environment. And you can specify that environment, that profile, through a myriad of ways. You can specify it as a command line attribute. You can specify it programmatically on the application context environment object. Or you can just let the default one kick in. Cloud Foundry will support the cloud environment. So if you have a profile set tagged cloud, just the quotes, quote cloud, that will get run as well for you. So we have here a lot of different profiles. Okay, so this is otherwise just a regular Spring application. This is the programmatic equivalent of web.xml. I don't know if you've seen that before. And we need our services. The services are where the rubber meets the road, right? This is otherwise an unchanged Spring application. All we want to do is take advantage of the fact that we're running in Cloud Foundry and leverage those services if they're available. So for example, you'll see we have lots of different profiles here. And in the example that we saw earlier as Andy deployed it, we switched the profile live using that dropdown, and that triggered the using of different. When we redeployed it, it showed the profile that was active, and we could see which services were being bound based on auto reconfiguration. The easiest way, yes, no, sell my soul. Okay. The easiest way to get an application up and running on Cloud Foundry that's based on Spring is just to let auto reconfiguration do its magic. It'll detect that you have a data source or some sort of service type that is the client interface for a service that you have bound to your application on the server side, on the cloud. And if we have support for the specific type of service, which at this point consists of things like MySQL, Postgres, RabbitMQ, Redis, etc., MongoDB, we will provide that automatically. We'll replace dynamically the reference that you have configured in your bean context with the reference that points to the services as deployed on Cloud Foundry. If, however, you want to exercise more control on how these services are configured, you could, of course, just parse this environment variable. This is easy, right? We all parse and munge JSON APIs in our sleep, right? I just this morning I did this, for mental exercise. But I wouldn't recommend it. Again, we can do better. So there's an amazing API you can use, add it to your Maven dependency or Gradle dependencies. It's called the Cloud Foundry Runtime. My hero, Ramnivas, standing there in the back, is the lead ninja behind that. So if you have questions and praise, tell him. If you have complaints, tell Scott. Okay, so this API, all it does is it hides a lot of that JSON environment variable munging that we could do ourselves, and dynamically sort of inflates services for you on your behalf, right? It looks at these environment variables, grabs the username, the password, the port, and all that stuff, and creates a data source or a Mongo instance or a Redis connection, etc. Once you've got that cloud environment object in the class path, using it is fairly simple. Well, it's dead simple, actually. You just instantiate an instance, and then you can interrogate it. You can ask questions, like, for example, where am I running? How many instances are there? What's the URI of the cloud that I'm using, etc. Let's see. Moving on. Another way so you can actually use that cloud environment to, in code using Java configuration, instantiate a service or create a service. You can also use the cloud namespace. The cloud namespace provides support for doing this using the Spring XML configuration format. Just show of hands, how many of you guys are using XML for your Spring applications? It's fine, of course. Me too. Java configuration? Okay, so we've got you both covered. The namespace itself provides the ability to dynamically inflate services for you. So it'll look at what you've got configured in the cloud and then provide beans for you that you can inject using @autowired or @inject, just by type, right? So you don't have to know about the beans or anything. It'll just do it dynamically. Or you can take more control, again, and actually tailor how each type of service is created. So for here, for example, I'm saying I want to reference the service that I've bound for a data source, and I want to be able to make that available and use that in my configuration. Here, when I use the cloud::data source element, I'm saying, make this a reference to the data source that I want to be able to inject and manipulate in my Spring application. And then I can do so as normal. Here, for example, I'm referencing the data source in my local container entity manager factory bean for JPA support inside of Spring. I can override certain characteristics, of course. Another sort of lower level way to work is to actually get access to the various properties that the Cloud Foundry Runtime API makes available in the Spring environment abstraction. Again, these properties essentially just contributes another property source. It's just another place for those environment variables to be made available. The reason you might want to do this, for example, is if you don't like the defaults. Okay, so perhaps you don't want to let the runtime give you a data source instance. Perhaps you want to just tailor it yourself and override the connection pool and change whatever else you want. So you need access to things like the username and the password and so on. This is still leagues better than actually just munging and parsing that environment variable. So here I'm using it to create a different connection pool. I've omitted some code for brevity. As I mentioned, all this hinges on the environment abstraction, again, introduced in Spring 3.1. If you're using it from code, I mean, from Java configuration. Let's see. I mentioned profiles. We've talked about profiles a couple different times. The value here is that you have the ability to isolate configuration for different types of runtimes in your, in these little scoped, profiled beans, right? So for example, I might have one set of configuration for my cloud, one for Q&A, one for dev, one for testing, one for this, that, and the rest. Let's see. Moving on.
Just to be clear, we're stepping through these quickly because we're aware of time
yes.
and the network issues. So
right.
Obviously the slides will be available and the recording will be available.
Right. To programmatically create a service, I wanted to show you guys this. This is the actual, this is the service creator. This is the idea is here. You get the cloud environment. You query the environment for any type of service, one of the services types that we know about. So for example, I want to discover what relational databases are bound to my application. And in particular, I want to retrieve a reference to the relational database named MySQL service. That will specifically pluck that particular service and provide a RDBMS service info object, which I can then feed to my RDBMS service creator and inflate, if you will, a data source. So while this is easy to use inside of Java configuration, you could, of course, just use this in any regular Java application. It isn't specific to Spring, okay? Questions on that? Okay, moving on. How are we doing for time? 5 minutes, okay, good. Cloud Foundry demo, we've got that already. Well, let's see what we've got back here, actually. Oh boy. Boy, that's peppy. How many of you guys are using the latest and greatest STS? The new 3.2 series is markedly faster than the 3.0 series. So if you haven't upgraded, do. There we are. Okay. Yes, sir. How much of the cloud interface support is Cloud Foundry? You want to answer that, Romneos, while I do this?
The question was, how much of the cloud namespace support is specific to Cloud Foundry?
Right now, this one is very nice to Cloud Foundry, but we are working on separate project of Spring Cloud, which essentially abstracts cloud. And of course, similar API might be cloud account, and service.
The important thing about the cloud profile is
No, thank you.
the important about the cloud profile on Cloud Foundry is that when you deploy your app to Cloud Foundry, if you have a profile called Cloud, it will automatically be applied. At the moment, there's a tight coupling between the two, but as Navas has just said, there'll be a Spring Cloud project which will decouple it and make that abstraction cleaner in the future.
Okay. The other thing you need to do if you have a fresh install of STS, besides installing the Gradle plugin, which I've just done, you need to set up a Cloud Foundry instance, right? We have a connector that's just been freshly updated, as I say. I'm not going to repeat the process, but if you were to do it, you would go to the new server panel there, choose Pivotal, and then choose Cloud Foundry, and there you can configure your connection information, right? You're basically doing the same thing we did in the command line. You're doing cftarget and cflogin. So cancel this. Once you have this integration enabled, you can just double click on this guy and sort of inspect the deployed applications just as you might using the web console or the command line. You can also look at the configured applications and the services that are bound to those applications. So for example, here I've selected Spring Music, and here I can see the two services bound to that instance, and I can see the status of the application and the mapped URLs and everything else. We will delete this guy. Is it running though? No, it's not running. Couldn't be running. What sort of sorcery is that? Didn't I kill that thing? Oh, thank you. Stop this guy. Cross your fingers, folks. 4 minutes to the finish line. Tension you could cut with a knife, you know. Move this guy. Now, the Cloud Foundry integration for Eclipse was meant specifically for people like me who don't do well before noon without enough coffee. So it's drag and drool friendly, right? Just take your existing application. I'm going to not delete my existing services because I want to just rebind to those. I don't want to have to reset that up. Okay, so I'm going to take my Spring Music application, drag and drool onto the Cloud Foundry connector. It'll prompt me to specify information about the actual application, stuff I would specify in the command line otherwise. I'm going to hit next, wait for it to interact with everything. It's pre-configured that for me. Which services were they again? Fair enough. Do you want to try the New Relic one? Hit finish. This is where the awkwardness sets in. While this chugs along, questions, since we have a few minutes. Any questions? Comments, feedback, tomatoes? Oh yeah, hi. Actually, oh yeah, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. So how can we tune the Java parameters and so on? So there's two things you can do there. So as I mentioned, Cloud Foundry has an environment, and Josh showed you that horrible bit of JSON which said VCAP application and so on, and that was extracted from what ends up on the droplet execution agent's environment on the server side. So what we can actually do with the CF tool at the command line is assign environment variables if we needed to do that. The other thing that you can do in terms of configuring the Java build pack, if you go into the Java build pack documentation on GitHub, you can actually fine-tune things like JVM parameters and so on in there. Okay, so Ben and his team have done a great job of documenting how to actually take the Java build pack, modify its configuration and parameters, and then redeploy your application. So those are the two ways you could do that. Is there a way of installing profiling tools? Well, New Relic is one of those, right? So New Relic is we've actually included their client jar or their connector jar. So when we bind to New Relic, it starts sending information to New Relic straight away. Yeah, so again, that would be something that you could, if you look at the Java build pack for Cloud Foundry documentation, there is information about that in there about how to extend it with your own jars and additions like profiling tools and others. And again, Ben's been on stage parallel with us, but He's around here all week, and he'll be really happy to talk to you about that kind of stuff. Thanks. Dude, I think we're going to run out of time.
Any questions as we wait for the countdown and wait for the things to put? Come on, Daddy needs to go out. Questions? Well, I have questions. How you guys doing? How did you guys like the keynote yesterday? What's the good word? Thunder brew. What's the model? Yes.
You can't directly drag and drop between spaces right now. That's something that we might add in the future, but you can certainly deploy to retarget a different space. I want to first of all apologize that a couple of our demos didn't work entirely. I'm again happy to walk you through things in the demo lounge this week if you come and find me. I also want to mention, and I'm just going to double check, that the next talk in here, which will be a Cloud Foundry one, as I try and navigate is build your very own private Cloud Foundry with my colleague Matt Stein. So if you want to learn more about that, come back in here at 10:30. We've got a half-hour break now. But thank you very much for your attention, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen.